This is how I made my first $100,000 teaching drums online, and I'm going to run you through the steps that I went through to get there, the challenges that I faced along the way, and obviously some of the lessons learned. In the beginning, it took me about 18 months, right, from starting to actually clocking about 100,000 in revenue, and it helped me build a program that ultimately went on to make me multiple six figures. So I'm going to get into a bit of the story time behind how I did it and what I learned along the way. So for context, I've been a professional musician my whole life, and a few years back, about 6 or 7 years ago now, I was working on cruise ships, right? I'd done a few cruise ship contracts and I was pretty sick of it. I'm going to be honest. I'd done it. I kind of done it to death. And in my last contract, I was thinking, you know what? I really want to move on from this. I want to do something else. And I had my sights set on moving to London. Now, I'm from Australia originally, and I wanted to move somewhere new. I wanted to move to a big musical city. I had one connection in London, and I thought I'd try and make it work. Now, I knew ahead of time leading up to this that I would kind of need something to support myself, obviously some way of making money, right, online. Now, I knew I wanted to teach. I knew I wanted to do something online, something that would help me get established in London, kind of make that transition a little bit easier. So towards the back end of my last ship contract, I enlisted the help of a mentor to help me get set up with things online. Now, this was not a musician mentor, right? Musicians are notoriously pretty bad at making money. So I enlisted the help of someone who was not a musician in order to give me some direction. Now, where it all started basically with this mentor was getting me to think about who I really wanted to teach. So the starting place was like, who are the people that you're passionate about teaching? Now, as a musician, I've had many teaching jobs over the years, some of them good, some of them awful. I've taught from kindergarten all the way through to university level. And I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to teach kids anymore. I didn't want to teach beginners. So I had this idea of like, wouldn't it be great to just teach like passionate people who are a bit more intermediate level players and target them? Now, what I did basically in first making that decision was then I went out and started to do some research about the types of problems that these players were struggling with. Now, upon doing some of this research, this sort of common theme kept coming up, this common problem that these intermediate level drummers were experiencing. It was all centered around this idea of flow and fluidity and like being able to improvise and being able to hear things in your head and express them on the drums. And in doing this research, I also had this feeling that like, that's actually something that I'm quite good at doing and quite good at teaching because I have a jazz background, right? I come from an improvisational background and I'm a very right brain person. So I'd come up with a lot of sort of systems and ways of teaching myself how to get good at those things, but also teaching others. So this theme came up and it very much led the direction of where I was going to take things in terms of what I was teaching online. The same buzzwords kept coming up when I did this research, which was flow, fluidity, and fluency, which led me to ultimately create the backbone of what was to be a sort of a program centered around improving those areas. Now, one of the things that my mentor advised me was, look, it works really well if you can package that into a kind of a fixed term program. So what I ended up doing was creating the backbone or the idea of a program. It was a 12-week program that was called Drum Flow Coaching. And the specific goal of this program was to help intermediate drummers develop flow on the drums. Now, once we had this kind of concept or an idea for a program, the next step was then to kind of get out there and start talking to people about it and sharing the potential results that they could expect from it. So initially, we did most of this on Facebook, right? I was simply just making posts on Facebook. Now, what was funny about this was while I was still on the ship at this point, I was still kind of building this up on the ship. And when you're on a cruise ship contract, you have kind of limited time during the day. So we'd dock in a port, we'd get off the ship, I'd run to a cafe, find some Wi-Fi, and I'd be doing these Facebook posts, right? And trying to connect with those intermediate drummers, trying to find those intermediate drummers that have that problem. Then the other thing the mentor advised me was basically like, you're going to do this 12-week program and you're going to charge $1,000 for it. And I was like, there's no way anybody's going to pay that for drum lessons. It's just like completely unrealistic. I pushed back a lot. And he kept saying over and over again, just trust me, just trust me. Once we'd come up with the pricing, by this stage, I was used to, talking to different intermediate drummers, kind of talking about my program. And it got to the point where after a few practice runs and, practice runs explaining my program to a potential student, it got to the time where I was going to pitch them and basically tell them and make the offer, start working with me for 12 weeks, it's $1,000. I remember the first ever time I did this and I presented my offer to someone. I was in the Caribbean, and I was at this cafe, this really kind of dingy cafe, right? This rundown cafe that had Wi-Fi. And I remember jumping on this call with this potential student, kind of explaining my program. And I was coming up to the point where I had to make the offer, right? And I was starting to get nervous. My heart was beating. And I just kept telling myself, like, all I have to do is just do it. I just have to make the offer, and then I'll feel better about it because I would have done it. And as I'm coming up to like telling the price, I notice in the corner of my eye, like on Zoom, behind me, there's like this broken television, like this TV that has like a hole in it and like all these wires hanging down. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, there's no way this guy's going to say yes to this. Like, I'm just some random guy basically pitching him for $1,000. And like, obviously I did. Obviously he was like, oh, it sounds really great, man. But, I'll have to have a think about it, whatever. He ended up passing, but I was very proud of myself for having kind of taken that step and presenting the offer to someone. Now, after a few of these calls, after getting comfortable, after getting better at it, what eventually happened was I got my first student, and this was someone who I found on Facebook. We connected, we chatted a little bit on Facebook, we jumped on a call. I told him about my program, I made the offer, and he said yes. And actually what was funny was I wasn't really ready for him to say yes. So he was like, yeah, man, I'm in. And I was like, oh, damn. And I wasn't really ready. So I had to like make a PayPal account. I remember in the call, I'm like talking to him and I'm like, yeah, cool, man. Like setting up PayPal so I could process the payment. And I think we did like a 3-part payment plan or something. So he sent me like $333 and I started working with him. And this was a really big moment for me because even though I'd been a freelance musician like my whole life, it was kind of my first real like entrepreneurial dollar that I made. I was working with this process, iterating this, improving it, and that's basically how I got my first, I think 10 or 15 clients or so, was just doing that, just reaching out to people on Facebook, jumping on a call, kind of presenting my offer to them. Now, the next phase, by this stage, I think I'd made about 12 or 15K, something like that. With my first handful of students, I had a bit more resources now to kind of invest back into it. By this stage, I had moved to London. I had a bit of a studio set up, so I had some resources available to like make better content and make better things for my clients. But what ultimately happened was I ended up making iterations and improving this program, this 12-week program. Now, I really like the fixed term idea because you get really good at refining a process to produce a specific result. And then when we're going to find the students, we're just trying to find people that match what it is we do, what it is that we offer with that program. So drum flow coaching evolved and it kind of galvanized the curriculum. So the curriculum became a bit more set. I really knew exactly the type of person that would succeed in a program like that. And it made it easy to take on more clients. Now, I did eventually run into what I would call a high quality problem, is that I kind of ran out of time. Like I kind of maxed out my time. I think when I was working with about 10 or 11 concurrent students, there's a lot of sessions in the week, to sort of keep up with, as well as the other parts of the business of reaching out to people and doing free sessions with people to talk about my program, all that kind of stuff. So what ended up happening then was, in order for me to accommodate more students, I ended up creating a sort of video info delivery where I automated the delivery side of the program. So because it was more of a program centered around coaching, I had more points of contact with the students. So I would, obviously in the main session that we had once a week, I would tell them, look, this is the exercise, this is what you need to do. But then we had more contact in between. Like I would provide feedback on their lessons. I would answer them questions, that sort of thing. So in order to basically create this video course essentially of just the instructions, right? All the feedback and everything is still there, it's still that one-to-one, but it ended up turning into a bit of a hybrid type program, which was really lessened my time input, but it meant I could take on more students and they were still getting great results. So by this stage, I think I was looking, this was about from students 20 to 30 or 20 to 40, something in there. Also, somewhere in there, I ended up increasing the price because, I saw that people were getting great results. I started to get testimonials as well from these happy students, which made it easier to get more students. And also putting the price up just meant that I had a bit more headroom, bit more capital to deploy to help those students and help put money back into the business. So I think I put it up to about 1,500 at one point. So by this stage, I think I'd made about 40 or 50K, something like that. And this is over a maybe 12-month period or something like that. But I really felt that difference. It was a bit of a shift once I started getting those testimonials, once I switched to this kind of hybrid thing where it was still one-to-one, but I was automating parts of the delivery to kind of help get the students' results. And that, like I said, that took about 12, kind of 13 months, but I really felt that shift when the testimonials started to come in. At that point, I ended up creating a YouTube channel and started posting content on Instagram. Now, what this did is it meant that people started to come to me and express interest in my program rather than me having to go and knock on doors so much, so to speak. So it kind of automated more of the front end, which made it much, much easier to get students. So instead of me reaching out to people on Facebook and saying, hey man, maybe you're interested in this, I had people coming to me and saying, hey, I've heard about your program, how much is it? Like, I'd love to hear about it. Can we jump on a call and talk about it? Once I made the YouTube at its peak, I only had like 3,500 subscribers or something. It was nothing crazy. I've since deleted that channel, obviously, to focus on this one. But even with a really small YouTube channel like that, because I was offering a sort of more expensive program, it was very profitable, right? I really didn't have to make that many videos before people started reaching out to me. I ended up creating a website as well, which is a landing page where you could watch a YouTube video, you could click on the page, obviously check out the program, and you could, submit your interest. And honestly, that last leg to 100K, that happened in about kind of 4 or 5 months. So I went from these kind of 2K, 3K months to, 8K, 9K, 10K months, which made hitting that 100K milestone. It came much quicker than I was kind of expecting in that period. The other thing that happens too, when you do it like this, when you kind of create a program like this, is a certain percentage of your students are going to want to keep working with you. So they do the program, they get really great results in the 12 weeks, and then they finish and they go, okay, what's next? So then that would be another source of revenue where like a certain percentage of my students would stay on, and I would just charge them a monthly retainer, and we just have weekly one-to-one sessions like a normal kind of coaching situation. So that was obviously a little bit of an extra source of revenue. Another thing that I found helpful was I did a collaboration with a couple of YouTubers, and one of them actually ended up becoming a coach in my program. So we did sort of a joint coaching program, which again took a bit of the load off me again in terms of delivery, helping my students get results, which allowed me to put more kind of effort into YouTube and that sort of thing. So basically, to hit that milestone, I wasn't running ads. I wasn't doing any of that. I basically did it all with Facebook outreach, just creating a really strong identity with the program and exactly what problem it solved for people. Then I created the YouTube and the Instagram. I did a little bit of content, right? The next 100K, which happened faster, right? Because I started to run ads. Now, this is a whole separate ball game. Obviously, we can go down this route, but especially if you're thinking about doing something similar, obviously what I'm working on with my clients right now is not running ads at all. But if you do it this way first, you do, create a program, create some content. It means when you go to start making ads, you have an idea of what resonates. You have an idea of what works. So then when you go to start to spend money on getting students, it's going to be much more profitable because you actually have an idea of what works. So when I started running ads, basically it was a simple Facebook ad campaign that would send people to a Facebook group. And again, I was posting content in there similar as well. And again, would just, jump on calls with people, tell them about the program. So that made things much easier to hit the next milestone. But that first 100K was no ads. It was all organic, right? But the main lesson I learned was really creating something, an offer, an outcome, a program that really speaks to the people that you want to teach. So obviously a bit of a rough kind of story time here as far as this goes. If you want a more in-depth, detailed version of exactly what I did, check this video. This is what I'm helping my clients with now with Musician Freedom. If you're interested in that, check out the community down below. That's over on School. It's a good community of musicians looking to generate more income and freedom, flexibility with teaching online.